Are you in the middle of renovating your home and have questions about color? Well, drop your paint roller, put down your fabric swatches, don't make one decision until you watch this episode. We're going to the masters on that subject, the cinema. You won't want to miss it. Hi, I'm Marina Coates. Welcome to Cinematically Inspired Design. On today's episode, the first episode ever, we're going to be exploring the use of color in the cinema. And the reason it's our first topic is because of how important color is in the cinema. We're starting with a segment called Color Beyond. It's a principle in the cinema used quite often, and what it does is it adds interest, drama, creates a mood. Take a look. I'm going to start with a very simple example. This one comes from The Parent Trap. And you can see in this main living room there's a lot of yellow and a lot of orange. So you see pillows and chairs in orange. But I want you to look off in the distance. What catches your eye? If you look beyond the room, you see an orange chair in a hallway back there, and it has a light on it so it really lights up. And what this does, and it was done on purpose, is it draws your eye beyond that room. And it makes what's going on in the distance seem part of the room. Here's another Parent Trap one. The original Parent Trap, they had a lot of fun with color. Now you look at this room of hers, and it doesn't look like they've used Color Beyond, but why did they leave those doors open, right? The doors are open. If they were shut, it would be a really cool room, but wouldn't have that dimension to it. And because we're seeing beyond, we're seeing creamy walls that almost look yellow. We're seeing the wood frame on the door that gives an orangish color, and that all ties in completely with what's going on inside the room. Even the luggage she's carrying, the blue, is tied in the room, so it brings that color past there. In this next image, also from The Parent Trap, love this one. We see Marina in the kitchen making dinner, and I can guarantee you the colors they chose for the pots was even very purposeful. So you see a red and a yellow pot. You see Marina O'Hara and her colorful outfit, a blue vase in the background. But look beyond that. What's in the distance there outside the window? You see stained glass, very colorful stained glass, and you see the same colors in it. You see the blue and the yellow and the red. And that was done on purpose, and it captures our attention. So imagine if it wasn't there. The room wouldn't pull you in the same way, would it? It's intriguing. It brings your eye beyond. In just those few examples from The Parent Trap, you're able to see what Color Beyond does, what that principle does. It draws your eye past the room, making that room beyond seem like part of the one you're standing in, so it adds dimension and gives a little mystery. You know, what's back there? Sometimes in the cinema, color is obscured, and you're about to see an example of that. Here's one from The Best of Everything. So they're meeting at a restaurant, and they use, of course, the same design techniques for a restaurant, and more importantly, those are things you can use in your own home. So right up front of this scene, we see the golden bench, which is beautiful. We see a lot of blue in the scene, but look beyond that. There's a color going on in the distance, and they have a screen there, and that's on purpose so that you're looking through it, so it's obscured. And this can be brought into your own home. All it is paying attention to the views you have when you're in, let's say, your living room. Can you see your kitchen from there? Consider the colors in your kitchen then as an extension of the living room if you can see them from there, because other people will be able to see that too. So use that to your advantage. In that last example, you can see that instead of just matching the colors that are in the room you're standing in with colors in the room beyond, they actually introduced new colors, and that's a really interesting thing to do in your own home. Sometimes the cinema brings color in unconventional ways. This is another example from that same movie, The Best of Everything. Notice they have art on the wall, beautiful, colorful art. Draws your eye there. The whole room is kind of a greenish blue, but they have even used the view from the window to add to the scheme of the room. Obviously, this was done on purpose. They could have left those just regular buildings, but look what it would do. It just isn't quite as captivating. So how do you do that in your own home? And no, I am not saying that you need to go put colored lights on your neighbor's house behind you or anything like that. But it tells us an idea, a principle that we can definitely use in our homes. And again, it's about taking color beyond the room. That's one of the techniques that doesn't have to be expensive at all. Now in this next example, the angle of the camera actually matters, but that's okay, because when you have guests over to your house, or even you in your own home, when you're standing in a room, as you walk around in your different parts of the room, you're going to see different views. And what that does is it makes it like that room isn't stayed. It isn't just one set thing, because it can give each part of the room another little thing, another little interest. I have a couple images here from a movie called The Help, and you'll notice in this first one in the living room, what do you see beyond? There's definitely color beyond. That door, that soft, creamy, warm mint green door. The shot was made on purpose so you could see that. It becomes part of the room. Now imagine if there was just a wall there, or a door. The room would still be amazing, but this definitely grabs your attention. This next example incorporates light into the room to infuse the color with life and vibrancy. You'll see. So this one's interesting. We see Bryce Howard standing at the podium. They did something very purposeful here. What makes this image interesting? Well, about 100 things. But we're going to concentrate on one thing right now. Notice they put her, instead of just in front of a wall, there is a room behind her. So we see her dress kind of glowing red. We see the couch, we notice that back there, and the painting. It's intriguing. It takes our eyes past the room we're standing in. In this next image, you'll see the principle of color beyond played out in the wall color of a whole room beyond. So in this image from Imitation of Life, you can see very clearly that they have a yellow dining room off in the distance that draws your eye there. That's color beyond this neutral room that we're sitting in. Coming up, we're going to see objects used as well as wall color in the room beyond and the room you're standing in, and how they play off of each other. It's interesting. Take a look. This is from Remains of the Day. Gorgeous. In the room in the forefront, we have a deep blue on the walls, but the room that we see just beyond, we see a lot of red brought in. And of course it ties in with the books behind her head, you can see on the left there. And that all ties in with the chair, the striped chair in that room beyond. Next up, we're going to see a rather dramatic use of color beyond on a feature wall. One more from The Best of Everything. In this office, they've used a not so subtle use of the room beyond, or the color beyond, in the red on that back wall that is on the bookshelves. So in the front, of course, we have the red painting on the right, we have a little red in the painting on the left, red on the desk, but your eye is drawn to that room beyond. So you're enjoying this front scene, this room in the front very much, but you also are looking beyond. It just naturally draws your eye there. In this last example, what you're about to see, I will then use as inspiration to do a before and after room transformation, so stick around afterwards. This is one of my favorite images, and it's from the movie Mame, Auntie Mame. And what I love about it is the use of color beyond here. It's obscured a bit by this brass colored grid, and beyond it, what do you see? You see this soft, dusty, ethereal, almost teal color, and it just works so well with her orange outfit that she's wearing there. This, in fact, inspired me when I was doing my remodel of the Brady Bunch home. This week's room transformation comes from my website. On my website, I take TV and movie homes and show 3D renderings of them, but then I update them, because the reason I do that is I like to see how that family might be living today. Normally what I'll be doing in this segment when I do a room transformation is I will be starting with a current room, a room that has current design in it, and then taking it from there to cinematically inspired design. But in this transformation, I wanted to start with the Brady Bunch house because we just got done talking about the movie Mame, and I used Mame as inspiration when I did this room, and you'll see why in a bit. So when I was redesigning the Brady home and trying to see what they might be living like today, one thing I wanted to keep in every room was the color orange, because when we think of the Brady bunch and their house, we think of orange. But I wanted to update it. But also in their bedroom, blue played a big part, and so I wanted to keep blue but update that also. And then the third thing that we see in their room that is iconic and I felt needed to stay is the screen behind their bed. So I just wanted to update that. Now I knew that Mike Brady was an architect, and one thing I know about architects is they love to explore all the latest materials that have just come out in metals, tile, concrete, whatever it is. So I knew he would probably have some fun playing with that. I knew one thing for sure, he wasn't going to paint that natural beautiful wood like they had his home look like in the 80s when they did a Brady Bunch TV movie. And Carol, she's of the latest fashion, she has a fun personality, she'd want to try new things. So I felt like they would update their home, they wouldn't have left it in the 60s and 70s. So here's the before and after room transformation. Now I'm going to give you some close-ups. Below I'll have links to the photography you see on the wall, the wallpaper in the background, and the paint color and that bathroom tile. So that's this week's room transformation using design techniques from the cinema. This next segment is on the dispersion of color in the cinema, and I think once again you're going to be surprised how often they use it and the different ways. Let's take a look. Here's an example from the movie Bewitched with Nicole Kidman. We're looking at her kitchen, and I want to just take your eye to the orange in the room. So you'll see on the left an orange pot on the stove. You see an orange pan hanging up above. We see the orange pumpkin in the background on the island, and under Nicole's elbow you'll see an orange striped glass vase. That's just some of the orange in the room. You see some in the front too. You see a cloth by the basket and a little TV next to it that says Bewitched on it. So let's examine this. Here's the principle I'm showing you here. In the cinema, they will often take color, the same color, and sprinkle it around the room. And that's so that your eye is drawn from one point to the next around the room instead of just zeroing in on one thing. It makes you scan the room. But they do something else really interesting with it. They have it at different levels. You'll see it at countertop level, and then you see it up high in the pots and pans. But they do it in another way too, the different levels of foreground and background. So you'll have some in the front, like the orange cloth, things in the basket. You have some off in the distance, like the vase under her elbow, and some in between, like the pot on the stove on the left. And this just draws your eye around the whole room. So in the last image that we explored together from the Bewitched home, I just want to point out again that we're talking about the color not only being sprinkled around the room, but that it is at different levels, both high and low, but also in the forefront and in the background of the picture. And you're going to see that example coming up in this next image that we're going to look at too. This is from a movie called Imitation of Life, and in this room you'll see pink brought in. Love this shot. I love the view they have of this room. But you'll see the pink flowers on the left that are in the forefront. And then in the background you'll see books that appear pink, or at least that dark magenta kind of color that the roses are. And then you'll see pink, of course, in the middle. So between the foreground and the background you see the daughter, Sandra Dee, standing there wearing a pink outfit, pink shoes, and it just all ties together. It makes you look around the room. Next up, you're going to see color dispersion again in a different scene from a different movie. What I want you to pay attention to in this one is also the great diversity in the materials used within that color. Another great example of this is found in The Courtship of Eddie's Father. So if you look at this image, let's first look at the yellows. So we're seeing the kitchen and the room beyond, the living room, the dining room. Look at how the yellows come in. They come in at different levels, both high and low, and forefront of the picture and the background of the picture. They also come in different materials, both fabrics, metals, plastic, and they've done the same thing here with the color orange. They have it both at different levels and made out of different materials. And what all this does is at least two things. One is this brings your eye around the room, and even in this case in the room beyond. It's more engaging, both in the fact that it's at different levels and that it's made out of different materials. One last example, and this one's from a more recent film. Again, you're going to see color dispersion throughout the room. But what I want you to pay attention to in this clip is that instead of using regular interior decor items, they use temporary things. Take a look. In this image from the movie The Devil Wears Prada, you can see an obvious color choice brought in, which is orange. But instead of bringing it in as home decor, or items around the room that you would find in interior design, they have temporary things sitting there. Packages on the floor, on top of the buffet. They're at different levels and they have a very strong presence and they bring your eye around the room. Now, I don't want you to get hung up on the fact that, well, those items that were in the room, those packages, they're temporary. They're not going to always be there, because there's a takeaway for us. An underlying principle in that image is a lot more color could have been brought into that room in interior design items, and it would have worked. It would have worked really well. So if you're redesigning a room in your home and you're looking at a movie home that you want to kind of take the essence from and bring it into your home, remember that you can take into account what the actors are wearing in those scenes, as well as temporary items, to give you a clue as to what color could be brought in and how much of it. Maybe some of you are thinking, you know, I would like to infuse more color into my design. I have ideas, I know what color I'd like to put where, but how do I go about that, and how do I do it inexpensively? Well, that's what this little segment is all about. As a designer, I have this same dilemma from time to time, and I came up with one solution. So sometimes when I'm designing a room, I might want, I'll know, maybe a golden yellow over the fireplace, a really rich color and a lot of it. I want it to take up a huge space. Well, how do you go about that without it costing a lot? Well, sometimes if I need a certain color, I'll use a photograph I've taken, or I'll go out and even take a photograph. For example, in this image, the photograph you see over the fireplace here is actually a picture I just went out and took, and I needed this particular color. And then I went online and printed that photograph onto a canvas the size I needed. And you just put it up on your wall and there you go. You have the color you wanted, the size you wanted, in the space you wanted. And it didn't cost a lot. There's a couple different places I use. I'll put them in the links below. One of the places I use is called Easy Canvas Prints. And I like them because you can get almost any dimension you want. They're inexpensive and it always ends up looking good. I'll put the link below. And by the way, I'm getting no compensation for this. In this last segment, we're going to talk about the saturation of color. Now, sometimes you don't want saturation, but that's for another episode coming up on part 2 of color. But in this episode, we're going to concentrate on when the cinema uses saturation and what that does to a room. Look how much life it brings into the room. Take a look. So let's start with this still from A Star is Born. We see James Mason golfing in the living room. Look at the strong, vibrant colors in that room. That deep yellow ochre kind of color, I would call it, on the major pieces of furniture. We see that golden yellow color brought in the background in the flowers, and we see some red in the still and some pink. Brings the room to life, because other than that, the room is mostly neutral with those screens and the curtains. Now let's desaturate it and see what we have. Still interesting. Still a cool room, but it adds an element, and I hope you can see that, what it does to that shot, and what it would do to your room if you had a mostly neutral room. Here's a simple one from that same movie, A Star is Born. In this, as she enters the room, again we're seeing color beyond. We're seeing blue outside, a very deep blue, and then also on top of the fridge they bring in a nice golden color, buttery golden color. So let's desaturate that and see what we have. Still cool, but that definitely adds a layer of interest, doesn't it? And that doesn't mean that every room in your home should be full of deep saturated colors. It just helps you see, when you're going for a certain look, how you can bring that in. Okay, a couple from The Parent Trap. Here we have Marina in the kitchen before. We've looked at this when we were talking about a different principle. With this one, I'm going to talk about saturation of color. Everything there, except maybe the telephone. All of the blues, the greens, the golds, the orange, the reds are deeply saturated, and it gives it a very distinct look. Now let's look at that same image, desaturated. See what a difference that makes? And then this is Haley's room on a Parent Trap, and the pillows on the bed have saturated color. So once again, I was just going to desaturate it and show you what that does. Makes a big difference. So to recap, in today's episode we learned 3 specific principles that the cinema puts into play involving color that helps create the moods that we love in those rooms. They were color beyond, dispersion of color, and saturation of color. Now it's time for viewer questions. I wanted to start with this one from a follower on Instagram because I thought it really speaks to what this show is all about, and this is being the first episode, it made sense. She writes, I wonder if there are identifiable ways average interior design differs from cinematic decorating, and if so, if you could present different rooms in the house that might be decorated by an interior designer and how the same rooms would look decorated cinematically. I'm so looking forward to this YouTube series and also seeing more of the Parent Trap house. Well, first of all, for those of you who don't know, I have 2 shows on this channel, this YouTube channel, and the other one is called Behind the Scenes, and that's where I make 3D models of TV and movie homes. I add the ceilings, the walls, and I let us walk around inside of them, but I also give interesting stories and fun facts about the house. That's what she's talking about, the Parent Trap. But back to her first question. She asked if there are identifiable differences. Well, obviously there's going to be overlap because they're both design, right? But what this show is going to do, it's going to focus on the principles used in the cinema that creates that unique look that makes us fall in love with those homes and creates a mood and tells a story of the people there. And as to the second question, asking about if I'm going to show the difference, yes. One of the things I'm going to do on this show every single episode is show a before and after. And the difference is when I do the before, instead of doing a broken down old kitchen, for example, or a living room from the 80s or 90s, I'm going to start with a current room that looks nice and then show you how it would look if we use these principles from the cinema. It's chocolate time! I promised you every week I'd highlight a chocolate of the week, and that's because another one of my obsessions other than cinematic design is chocolates. I'm going to start with a Godiva chocolate today called Salted Almond Truffle. All right, let's open the box. And I am not getting compensated for any of these chocolates. I'm honestly just telling you my favorite chocolates. Okay, it's this guy right here. I'm going to cut it open. I'm going to do a closer look for you in a minute. Okay, here's why I love it. The almond part inside is just right. It's not too salty, it's not too sweet, and it's just got a tiny bit of grit in it from the crushed up almonds, and they put it with milk chocolate, which is perfect. I love a lot of dark chocolates, but this goes great with milk chocolate. Bellissimo. If you like what you're hearing and you want to watch more episodes, make sure to subscribe and click on that little eye up in the corner and it will take you to the next episode. One of my favorite websites is Hooked on Houses, and with their permission I use some of the images from their website of movie houses in today's episode. You can also find me on my website, mockingbirdlane.design, as well as on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'll post those links below. But for now, that's a wrap. See you next time on Cinematically Inspired Design.